It's a revelation the world never expected to hear, one that cuts deep into the royal legacy and cracks open the long-buried truths of a marriage that captivated the globe. For decades, silence reigned around the tumultuous relationship between King Charles and Princess Diana. Polished interviews, carefully crafted biographies, and relentless tabloid speculation painted a fractured picture, but no real confession, until now. In a shocking twist, King Charles has reportedly broken his silence in private conversations that are now surfacing, and they are nothing short of explosive. "I hated her," he allegedly said, not with rage, but with the weary bitterness of a man who lived a lie too long. Was it hatred born of betrayal, jealousy, or simply years of being trapped in an impossible situation? What did he truly feel during their marriage behind palace doors? Today, we uncover the layers of love, loss, resentment, and royal duty that led to one of the most tragic unions in modern history, and how those haunting words are reshaping King Charles's legacy. Fairy tale or fabrication? Charles and Diana's marriage was crafted under a microscope of public adoration and royal expectation, yet it was built on fragile foundations. Charles was still emotionally entangled with Camilla Parker Bowles, a relationship that had never truly ended despite public perception. Diana sensed this from early on, even before the wedding, expressing concerns that were often dismissed or ignored by those around her. Her discovery of a bracelet Charles had made for Camilla just before their wedding further deepened her unease. The emotional disconnect between the couple only widened with time. Diana, inexperienced and vulnerable, was thrust into a world governed by tradition, protocol, and constant scrutiny. She battled loneliness and depression, including a widely reported struggle with bulimia exacerbated by the emotional void in her marriage and relentless media attention. Charles, meanwhile, found comfort and familiarity in Camilla, a woman who understood the demands of his royal life and with whom he shared intellectual and emotional compatibility. The royal household's inability or unwillingness to intervene or offer meaningful support worsened matters. Diana's fresh emotional honesty clashed with the rigid, reserved nature of the royal family. She wanted affection and connection. Charles offered distance and duty. Their incompatibility became more pronounced over time, especially as Diana grew into her public role, earning adoration from the public in a way that overshadowed Charles. This imbalance reportedly fueled resentment on his part and deepened the emotional rift between them. Despite the birth of their sons, William and Harry, which briefly offered moments of closeness, the marriage continued to unravel. Each step further exposed the fairy tale facade. The reality was far from romantic. It was a union born of duty, not love, and one riddled with miscommunication, unmet needs, and external pressures. Their eventual separation and then divorce became a tragic but predictable outcome of a relationship that, while iconic in appearance, was deeply flawed at its core. In hindsight, the royal wedding that captivated the world now reads less like a fairy tale and more like a carefully staged performance, a union designed for optics rather than emotional truth. The glittering ceremony may have fulfilled the monarchy's image goals, but behind the pageantry, the personal costs were immense for both Charles and Diana. Two strangers in royal cage. Life inside the royal cage quickly became a battlefield of unspoken tensions and emotional estrangement. Diana barely got of her teens and found herself immersed in a rigid institution that left little room for vulnerability. She was expected to smile, wave, and fulfill royal duties without question, all while fending off relentless media scrutiny. The fairy tale she had envisioned faded rapidly as she realized Charles was emotionally unavailable and emotionally tethered elsewhere. Charles's attachment to Camilla Parker Bowles remained constant, and Diana sensed it from the beginning. The discovery of the Fred and Gladys bracelet just before their wedding haunted her throughout their early years. That gift wasn't merely a token, it was a symbol of where Charles's affections truly lay. Though publicly married to Diana, his emotional loyalty never shifted. This betrayal, silent yet ever present, left Diana feeling isolated within the very walls that were meant to offer her security. The palace offered no refuge. It was a place governed by protocols, tradition, and stoicism, where emotions were either suppressed or seen as weakness. Diana's natural warmth and vulnerability clashed with the cold formality that surrounded her. Her growing popularity with the public made her a global icon, but within the royal household, it became a source of growing resentment. Charles, already unsure of his place in the public eye, saw her star rise and his dim by comparison. By the mid-1980s, Charles had resumed his affair with Camilla, no longer just a lingering emotional tie, but a full rekindling of a relationship he never wished to abandon. Diana, emotionally battered and increasingly aware of her husband's indifference, responded with her own affairs. But the emotional chasm between them had already become irreversible. They were no longer just incompatible. They had become adversaries trapped in the same golden cage. Charles viewed Diana's emotional openness and media savvy as manipulative. He reportedly believed she used her charm to control public perception and vilify him. Diana, in turn, saw Charles as cold, distant, and indifferent to her suffering. Their interactions, once hopeful, became increasingly bitter and strategic. Behind closed doors, there was no romance, only resentment and rivalry. They were two strangers bound by duty, bound by titles, and yet completely alone in each other's presence. The silent fury of a future king. The resentment Charles harbored toward Diana wasn't rooted in one event but built slowly, like sediment settling over years of emotional distance and public spectacle. To those closest to him, the phrase, "I hated her," was less about malice and more a cry of frustration, a release of years of bottled tension. Diana was unpredictable, emotionally candid, and worst of all, from Charles's point of view, beloved in a way he never managed to be. Her tears became headlines. Her pain became the public's cause. And through it all, Charles felt increasingly sidelined, overshadowed not only in their marriage, but also in his role as future king. Royal protocol had taught Charles to keep everything behind closed doors. Stoicism was not a choice, but a royal duty. Yet Diana broke every unspoken rule. She didn't just bend under pressure, she exposed it. When she spoke about her struggles with mental health and the suffocating loneliness of palace life, Charles reportedly saw it not as a plea for help, but as a calculated act of disobedience. Her transparency was viewed by him as performance, and performance, especially when done outside the palace's control, was perceived as treachery. When Diana's Panorama interview aired in 1995, the damage was beyond repair. Her now iconic line, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," struck a nerve so deep it became the symbolic nail in the coffin of any remaining goodwill. To Charles, she had violated every code of royal privacy. He didn't see a brave woman standing up for herself. He saw betrayal broadcast to millions, a direct strike on his dignity and reputation. Former aides say that in private he was livid, not just humiliated but outraged at what he felt was a global character assassination. Yet even amid this fury, there were layers of emotional complexity. Charles may not have hated Diana the person, but he hated what she became in the public eye. An icon of compassion who, in his mind, fed off chaos. He hated the loss of control, the constant reminders that his wife connected with the people in ways he never could. And he hated how she made him feel, irrelevant, misunderstood, and emotionally inadequate. For a man shaped by duty, tradition, and reserve, Diana's spontaneity and openness felt like threats. She turned emotion into power. And for Charles, who had been taught to suppress, not express, that power became unbearable. The fury, while mostly silent, simmered beneath the surface, a complex mix of grief, jealousy, and the pain of watching a marriage collapse under the weight of 2 people who were never meant to carry it. Diana's perspective. Diana's experience within the royal marriage was not one of privilege but of profound emotional deprivation. Isolated within palace walls and misunderstood by the man she had married, she found herself spiraling into despair. Her cries for connection were consistently met with detachment, Charles, consumed by duty and lingering affections for Camilla, failed to recognize the depth of Diana's need for love and validation. What she wanted was simple: a partner who saw her, chose her, and supported her. What she received was distance. She wasn't seeking sympathy or spectacle when she confided her truths to Andrew Morton, the tapes she recorded for his biography, Diana. Her true story were raw and unfiltered. In them, she detailed a life filled with rejection, feelings of inadequacy, and self-destructive behavior. These revelations weren't acts of revenge, they were pleas. She had tried everything behind closed doors. Speaking out publicly became her only remaining option. To be silent was to disappear. One of the most poignant moments in Diana's personal history was her confrontation with Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana didn't lash out with bitterness. Instead, she simply said, "I know what's going on. I just want my husband." That line stripped away the tabloid drama and reduced her pain to its core. She was a woman asking to be chosen. Her heartbreak wasn't about rivalry, it was about abandonment. She was never truly in a marriage with Charles. She was in a triangle, fighting for affection that had never been hers to begin with. Her struggle with bulimia, self-harm, and depression became symbols not of weakness, but of the crushing emotional weight she bore. The royal family, steeped in centuries of restraint, saw these issues as threats to their image. Diana saw them as the consequences of being emotionally invisible. She wasn't defiant for the sake of rebellion. She simply refused to be silent in a system that refused to acknowledge her pain. The Panorama interview in 1995 was Diana's ultimate turning point. Calm and composed, she laid bare the fractures in her marriage and the deep loneliness she had endured. Critics called it manipulative, but to Diana, it was survival. "I was crying out for help but giving the wrong signals," she said. She didn't want to shame Charles. She wanted someone, anyone, to hear her, to understand that beneath the tiaras and titles was a young woman unraveling. In the end, Diana wasn't a threat to the monarchy because she was dramatic. She was a threat because she was honest. Her vulnerability, her refusal to conform, and her courage to speak shattered the illusion that royal life was synonymous with happiness. All she ever wanted was to be loved and heard. When neither came, she chose to tell her own story, on her own terms. The explosive interview. The pair of high-profile interviews in the mid-1990s marked a dramatic unraveling of the already fractured marriage between Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Charles's 1994 interview with Jonathan Dimbleby was intended to provide his side of the story, but it failed to win sympathy. His admission of adultery, while framed carefully, was a stunning break from the royal tradition of silence. He confessed to rekindling his relationship with Camilla only after the marriage had irretrievably broken down. But the damage was done. Viewers found him cold, defensive, and lacking emotional accountability. A year later, Diana's Panorama interview with Martin Bashir took the country and the world by storm. Unlike Charles's carefully worded responses, Diana's answers were emotionally charged and unfiltered. She spoke of her mental health struggles, her deep unhappiness, and the lack of support she received from the royal family. Her now iconic line, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," became a devastating indictment of her husband's betrayal. Public opinion shifted dramatically in her favor. The once fairy tale union was now laid bare, and Diana emerged as the wounded yet resilient heroine. The fallout was immense. The press turned on Charles with renewed intensity, portraying him as cold and uncaring. Inside the palace, however, the situation was more complicated. Charles, already under immense pressure as heir to the throne, was reportedly enraged. Friends and staff claimed he felt humiliated and cornered, emotionally undone by Diana's candor. Armor. He couldn't publicly attack the mother of his children, but in private his bitterness deepened. He allegedly told close friends he hated the woman she had become, not necessarily Diana herself, but the version of her that the world now adored. His frustration stemmed from losing control over the narrative. For a man raised in an institution where image was paramount and silence was strength, Diana's emotional transparency was viewed as sabotage. She had exposed royal dysfunction in a way that no insider ever had. Her vulnerability became her weapon, and it pierced the armor of tradition Charles had spent his life upholding. These interviews weren't just revelations, they were declarations of war. The emotional wounds they opened never fully healed, and the monarchy itself would never be the same. Family fallouts. As Charles and Diana's marriage crumbled, their two sons became the unintended casualties of a deeply personal and very public war. William and Harry were thrust into a world of emotional turbulence, split loyalties, and relentless media scrutiny. Both parents loved them fiercely, but their fractured relationship created an unstable environment where the line between protection and projection often blurred. Diana, struggling with her own mental health and deep loneliness, turned to her sons, particularly William, for emotional support. She saw in him not just a future king but a confidant. William, still a child, was burdened with adult concerns far too early. He reportedly comforted his mother during crying spells and attempted to shield Harry from the worst of their family troubles. Diana's openness with her children came from a place of deep love, but it also placed emotional weight on their young shoulders. Charles, on the other hand, withdrew, not out of indifference, but from a fear of worsening the situation or being seen as the villain. He was more formal, focused on structure, and hesitant to express affection as openly as Diana. This contrast in parenting styles left an emotional imbalance. While Diana gave her boys warmth, attention, and moments of freedom from royal rigidity, Charles maintained the traditions and expectations of their lineage. The result was a complex emotional landscape in which both sons were forced to navigate love, loyalty, and confusion. After Diana's tragic death in 1997, Charles took on a more active role in his sons' lives. He altered royal plans to walk behind her coffin with them, offered public displays of grief rarely seen from him, and made efforts to be a present father. But the emotional damage from years of conflict lingered. The memory of Diana, her affection, her honesty, and her trauma remained vivid in her sons' minds, shaping how they viewed their father and the institution he represented. Privately, Charles was said to carry deep guilt, not just for how things ended with Diana, but for the ripple effects it had on William and Harry. He knew their upbringing had been marred by instability, media harassment, and emotional tension. In later years, attempts to reconcile with his sons were reportedly strained, complicated by old wounds, unspoken pain, and the long shadow cast by Diana's legacy, divorce, and death. By 1996, Diana and Charles were officially divorced. The war was over, at least on paper. Diana was no longer Her Royal Highness, but she was finally free from the institution that had confined her. Yet the sense of freedom was fleeting. Just a year later, in August 1997, she was killed in a car crash in Paris, sending the world into mourning. While the public blamed aggressive paparazzi for the crash, darker suspicions surfaced. A note Diana had written 2 years earlier came to light. In it, she claimed someone, implied to be Charles, was planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury. The contents were chilling. Handwritten and dated, the note was interpreted by some as proof of foul play. British authorities investigated the claims years later, even questioning Charles as part of Operation Paget, the official inquiry into her death. Nothing conclusive emerged. Still, the existence of the note kept conspiracy theories alive. Whether Diana truly feared for her life or was expressing the anxiety of a woman who had endured years of emotional neglect and manipulation remains unclear. Those close to her suggested she had become increasingly suspicious and anxious, particularly about the motives of those around her. The palace, for its part, dismissed the note as baseless. Charles's response to Diana's death drew immediate criticism. His public demeanor was subdued, even stoic, leading many to believe he was cold or indifferent. But insiders paint a different picture. Behind palace doors, he was said to be deeply shaken and filled with guilt, not only about her death, but about the years of pain that led up to it. At her funeral, he wore navy instead of black, a quiet, personal tribute. Navy had been her favorite color on him, and in that small detail, grief found its most honest expression. Diana's story didn't end with a divorce or even her tragic death. It became a legacy etched into the soul of a nation and a royal family forever changed. The note she left behind still haunts public imagination, and the emotional scars left on those involved, especially Charles and her sons, remain part of a larger, complicated truth. Love, betrayal, fear, and loss, all collided behind palace walls, far from the fairy tale image the world once believed. If this deep dive into the untold layers of Diana and Charles's story moved you or made you think differently, let us know in the comments below. What do you believe about the mysterious note? Was it fear or foresight? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more royal deep dives, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, every crown has its cracks.